بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد الصادق الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن استنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد. Alhamdulillah, we are gathered in physical presence in the house of Allah again to study the meanings of the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam from the compilation known as al-Arba'un al-Nawawiyya, the 40 Hadith collection of al-Imam al-Nawawi. And we've been at this for a while. We are now at Hadith number 37, which means we are at the tail end of the work. We'll probably be finished within the next 3 weeks, give or take. Today, inshallah, we're going to look at just a single hadith. And this hadith, hadith number 37, speaks about the grace and justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Remember, the 40 hadith collection of Imam al-Nawawi presents very comprehensive, important hadith narrations that speak to the overarching themes of the deen. And so this hadith is talking about Allah's grace and Allah's justice. When we talk about the creator of the heavens and the earth, Allah Jalla Jalaluhu, we speak about His fadl and His adl, His justice and His grace. Now, which one of those two do we wish to receive? Do we want Allah's justice? We don't want His justice. We want His mercy, His fadl, His grace. Allah Ta'ala is al-Adl. One of His divine names is the just. And we know that no one will be wronged in this life or in the hereafter. And where there is injustice in this world that we see a lot of these days, some of that injustice will be addressed and remedied in this world through us taking the proper steps to address it. But as believers, we also have to recognize that some injustice will not be addressed in this life, but it will all be addressed in the hereafter. So that person who wrongs another human being and seemingly gets away with it doesn't ever get away with it. They only get away with it in this life. They don't get away with it in the hereafter. So we ask Allah Ta'ala to deal with us not according to His justice, but according to His fadl, His grace. Because if Allah took us to task for our own negligence and our own shortcomings and gave us what we truly deserved, we would be in big trouble. So we don't ask Allah for that dealing. We ask Allah for the fadl, the grace. And we see in this hadith how Allah Ta'ala interacts with His servants on the basis of fadl, of grace. So we said, one of the divine names is al-Adl. And Allah mentions in the Quran in several places, after mentioning various things, He'll often conclude a verse by saying, Wallahu dhu fadlin azim. And Allah is the possessor of immense grace. So this hadith, hadith number 37, is from Ibn Abbas. We'll read it in Arabic, then in English, and look at the meaning. Imam al-Nawawi says, An Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma, عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فيما يرويه عن ربه تبارك وتعالى قال إن الله كتب الحسنات والسيئات ثم بين ذلك فمن هم بحسنة فلم يعملها كتبها الله عنده حسنة كاملة وإن هم بها فعملها كتبها الله عنده 10 حسنات إلى 700 ضعف إلى أضعاف كثيرة وإن هم بسيئة فلم يعملها كتبها الله عنده حسنة كاملة وإن هم بها فعملها كتبها الله سيئة واحدة. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, he reported that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam related or said among the things he related from his Lord, blessed and exalted is He, verily Allah has recorded good and evil deeds. Then He clarified that recording, the nature of that recording, or how it occurs. Whosoever decided to do a good deed, but did not do it, Allah records it with him as a complete good deed. And if he decided to do it and actually did it, Allah records it with him as 10 good deeds up to 700-fold and many times over. If he decided to do an evil deed but did not do it, Allah records it with him as one complete good deed. And if he decided to do it and actually did it, the evil deed, Allah records it as one sin, one evil deed. So this hadith is recorded by al-Bukhari and Muslim, and this is the wording in both of their collections. We begin with the first phrase. In the hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that Allah Ta'ala has recorded al-hasanat wa sayyi'at. He's recorded the good deeds and the bad deeds. And we know from other narrations that Allah Ta'ala has created some angels who are charged with writing the good deeds and the bad deeds. The hafadha, kiram katibin, they write down what we do. They write down what we say. So how do we reconcile the reality of these angels, these recording angels, and the fact that this hadith says that it's Allah who does it? Allah records the deeds. We reconcile it by looking at what we call isnad, the linkage of actions. Who takes the souls?
It's not the angel.
The angel of death, right? Azrael, right. So the angel of death takes the souls. We know that from the Quran. Malakul Maut, alladhi wukila bikum. And so he takes the souls. However, in other verses of the Quran, Allah says that it is He, Allah Jalla Jalaluhu, who yatawaffa al-anfus hina mawtiha, who takes the souls at the time of death. Some verses say that it is Allah who takes the souls, and some verses say it's the angels, the angel of death. How do we reconcile this? Well, Allah is the creator of all the actions. He is the creator of all things, and He is the one who gives the command. But the sabab, the cause, the secondary cause is that created thing, the angel of death. And it's the same thing here. The recording of actions, it is the command of Allah Ta'ala. It is His command. He creates these angels. He commands them to record. So you can say that it is Allah who is recording them through the command He gives to the angels to record them. So we can speak on two levels here. Allah takes the souls. The angels take the souls. But when we say the angels take the souls, it means something different. They are the sabab. They're not the immediate creator of that action. Same thing with the recording. The angels record the actions, good and bad. But it is Allah Ta'ala who records the actions insofar as He commands those angels to do so. So that's just a little clarification about what that means. So he begins, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, by saying that Allah recorded the good deeds and the evil deeds. And then he says, and whoever decides to do a good deed and then does it, he receives 10 to 700-fold and more multiplied rewards. And whoever decides to do a good deed and doesn't do it, they receive a good deed. So in order to understand this hadith and the relevance of the hadith to the collection, we have to talk about the meaning of this word, hamma. Man hamma bi hasanatin. Whoever decides to do something. How is it that you get a reward from Allah Ta'ala for this ham? You didn't do it, but you're getting a reward. So to understand this, we have to look at this term, ham, as well as other terms. Because in the sciences of Islamic spirituality, in our Islamic spiritual psychology, there are a lot of terms that describe thoughts, motivations, the internal drives and motivations for actions, and the nature of thoughts and things that spur us to action. And we need to categorize those and look at them individually so that we can see Where does ham fit into that scheme? This is what we call Islamic spiritual psychology, to understand the nature of thoughts. There are a lot of different terms that we learn about in the Islamic tradition pertaining to these passing thoughts or these decisions or motivations. So we're going to start with one, and this is really vital knowledge. A Muslim should really know this because it will save them from a lot of psychological turmoil if they understand this. So the first word we want to learn is the word khatir. I'm sure that word exists in other Islamic languages besides Arabic. I'm sure it exists in Urdu as well. Yeah. What does the word khatir in Urdu mean?
Hospitable, for the hospitality.
Okay, khatar, yeah. So something that is khatir is dangerous. Khatir in Arabic. For the sake of? Ah, okay, so it means something a little bit different in Urdu than in Arabic. Khatar is danger.
Khatir always comes with tawazu. Yeah, when you are hospitable to someone.
Oh, okay, so it's a little bit different.
Khatra is danger. Khatra is danger.
Khatar is different. Khatar is a different.
Okay, so the word khatir, the way it's pronounced in this form, khatir with the alif, it means a passing thought. A passing thought. Why do we call an accident why do we call this kind of dangerous event khatir? Or why do we use the word for emergency or dangerous? Well, it occurs suddenly. It's an accident that occurs suddenly. You didn't expect it. You didn't see it coming. Likewise, the khatir is the passing thought because it comes suddenly. You didn't plan it out, right? So the khawatir are passing thoughts. We go through thousands and thousands of passing thoughts in a single day. And if you try to still your mind and focus on your breathing and relax, you'll notice very quickly that your mind is assailed with all sorts of thoughts. And you don't know where they come from. It's a strange paradox. If you sit quietly, close your eyes, and focus on breathing, you may start having ideas pop into your mind. And you are observing those ideas come into your mind. You don't feel that you're actively creating those ideas. It's as if they're coming in there without your choice, and you're observing them. It's a very strange feeling when you observe that. We go through thousands and thousands of those. It's what the Buddhists refer to as the monkey mind. The monkey jumping all over the place, breaking the dishes and throwing food. It's like this. So in Islamic spiritual psychology, we understand that there are different types of passing thoughts. They're not all equal. And it is a part of our Islamic development to learn what they are and how to distinguish them. So we're going to look at some of these as we build this structure of learning what does ham mean in this hadith and how does it relate to the other types of thoughts. So first of all, khatir means the passing thought. And it might go in and go out as quickly as it came. And if you hold on to the passing thought, it passes in, then you capture it, what they call Saydul Khatir. Ibn Jawzi has a book by that title, the captured thoughts. If you capture it, it can become the spark for a desire or a decision, an intention to then do something, to act on that passing thought. But if you don't capture it, it goes in and leaves just as quickly as it came. But not all khawatir are equal. There are different types. So we're going to look at the very best to the very worst. So the very best khatir is what the scholars call al-khatir al-rabbani or al-khatir al-ilahi, the divine passing thought or the lordly passing thought. This means that it has divine origin. It is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as an inspiration from Allah ta'ala for you that pushes you to be a certain way or to do something. And I'll list them in order and then we'll discuss them each in a little bit. The second type of khatir is what we call al-khatir al-malaki, the angelic passing thought. This is the passing thought that comes as a suggestion from an angel. Not all suggestions we get are from shaitan. Some are from angels. The third is what we call al-khatir al-nafsani. It's from the ego, it's from the nafs. You have that desire, that passing thought of the nice bowl of ice cream, and you start craving it. That's your nafs, right? That's your nafs. And now if you act on it, it's no longer a khatir, it becomes an intention, it becomes a desire. And then we'll see the chain of events. The fourth one we call al-khatir al-Shaytani. That's the Shaytani passing thought. It is the whispering of Shaitan. And by Shaitan we mean either Iblis or his minions, his soldiers, who are suggesting ideas, right? So the Khatir Rabbani, the lordly, divine passing thought, we also call it warid. The warid, or the divine passing thought, it comes usually with a force you don't find with the others. If you've ever had an experience where out of nowhere you just had this desire, you have to do this, you have to get up and go do something, and it's a good deed, and it's usually an obligatory deed at that, and it just comes at you all of a sudden with a force, that is usually described as a divine passing thought, or a divine a khatir rabbani. The ulama say that usually this pertains to the obligatory actions. They say that if it's coming as a passing thought that's pushing you to do something recommended, it would be from an angel. But if it's coming with a push to do something obligatory, it would be a lordly, of divine origin. So that's the khatir ilahi. And the ulama say that it comes with force, and unlike other passing thoughts, it usually doesn't leave quickly. The others tend to leave quickly, but this one sticks with you. If you've ever had, this is similar to istikhara. If you've ever made an istikhara prayer, and the answer doesn't come in you opening the mushaf from a random place, it doesn't come from a dream, but it comes from this overwhelming feeling of clarity that you have to take this course of action, and there's no way you can take the other course. Even though before the istikhara, you were maybe leaning to one, but still considering the other. But after the istikhara, there's such clarity comes to your heart. It's almost as if you cannot choose the other option. You have to choose that one. That's the khatir rabbani, right? So the second category we talked about, the khatir malaki, the angelic passing thought, is similar to the first one, except that it's usually regarding recommended actions. An inspiration to do a good deed that's not obligatory individually, or an encouragement to have good character or to respond beautifully in a situation. It comes as an inspiration. Sometimes we call it ilham, inspiration. This is an angelic khatir, and it's a drive. The nafsani, we all know what the nafsani one is, because anytime you have a craving, it tends to be nafsani. But not all egos or souls are the same. We have some that are an-nafs al-ammara bis-su, the nafs, the ego that enjoins the person to do wrong. And then you have the ego that is self-blaming, an-nafs al-lawama. So not all of them are the same. Now usually the Shaytani khatir, the Shaytani passing thought, works in conjunction with the nafsani khatir, because there's already an inclination to it. And you can see that distinction, especially in Ramadan, because we know from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that when Ramadan arrives, the gates of Jannah are open, the gates of hell are closed, while sufidat ash-shayateen, the shayateen are locked up. So if you have a certain bad habit or certain things that you shouldn't be doing, and when Ramadan comes around, you have zero desire to do them, that's a good sign that it's coming from a shaitanic suggestion and whispering. But if the drive is still there, guess what? It's not shaitan anymore. It's you. It's you. Shaitan had nothing to do with it. He may have started the suggestion, but you then created the habit, as we're going to see. When we have all these steps, you can retrace the step. You can reverse engineer this process when you want to deal with bad habits. So the shaitani khatir is one that calls you to evil, to do things that are sinful, to neglect obligations, to have bad character, to laziness. And it's usually supported by the khatir of the nafs, of the ego. So a key feature of tazkiyatun nafs, of purifying the soul, is to recognize these khawatir, to understand what they are, and to recognize the difference between them. To notice them when they arise. You have to pay attention. Do all of our ideas come from ourselves? Not necessarily. To discern their source. If a passing thought comes into your heart or mind and you latch onto it, you have to figure out, you have to discern, where is it coming from? Is it just me? Is it an angelic source? Is it a divine source? Where is it coming from? We're not just subjected to the whisperings of shaitan. We also are getting the suggestions of angels. And we have this in popular culture, but it's misrepresented. In popular culture, at least in the West, if you watch the cartoons, the children's cartoons, you'll often see this, where if you watch Tom and Jerry, for instance, the old cartoon, or other cartoons, you'll see there's the angel that appears on the right shoulder. It has the halo, and then on the left shoulder is a devil in red with a pitchfork, and they're both suggesting to the person what to do. The devil saying do bad, the angel saying do good. That's a caricature, but it's a reality. You have angels that do suggest. You have shayateen that do suggest. It's not all coming from shaitan. So we have to discern what is angelic, what is nafsani, what is rabbani, what is nafsi, and so on. And from that, we know how to respond. So you respond to the ilahi, you respond to the angelic, you push away the shaitanic, and the nafsani one, well, it just depends on what it is. If it's that bowl of ice cream, why not? Unless you're on a diet and you want to avoid it, and in which case you have to push that thought away. So the key lesson here is that we don't want to overly identify with those passing thoughts and recognize that they're not all coming from within. Some ideas do come from within because of impressions and experience. They become desires that we're attached to. But there are a lot of things that come into our mind and heart that aren't really from us. And we were talking about this the other day in the class. You don't have to say if you've had this passing thought, but it's been mentioned before. That person who's walking down the street, a busy street downtown, and a passing thought occurs to their mind. What would happen if I push that person in the middle of the street? And as soon as that thought crosses their mind, it's gone. They don't dwell on it. If they dwelled on it and identified that thought with themselves, they might say, oh my God, I'm a horrible human being. I'm contemplating pushing people into a busy street. Or I wonder what would happen if I stole that necklace out of the jewelry store. Oh my gosh, I'm a thief. No, just weird ideas just come and go. So you can't overly identify with your thoughts like this. They're not always from you. And this is really important because a lot of people struggle with that. They'll have really bad thoughts. And because they believe those thoughts are from them, they feel something's wrong with them. I can't even tell you how many times people have come and said, I have these ideas in my head. They're really horrible and I don't dare speak them. And something's wrong with me. And when you ask about them, they say, well, it comes and goes. And they don't know. They assume that every thought that comes into their mind is theirs and they own it. It's not the case. One of the Sahaba came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, I have thought sometimes that I would never dare express to anyone. Passing thoughts, just stuff. And the Prophet ﷺ asked him, is that the case? Is that really the case? He said, yes. And then he says, ذَلِكَ صَرِيحُ الْإِيمَانِ. That is clear-cut, incontrovertible faith. Why? Because he recognizes that they're bad, doesn't like them, he pushes them out. The thing is, he thought that they were his own. But the fact that he disliked them indicates that his heart was healthy. If you think about pushing people in the middle of a busy road and you entertain the thought and enjoy it, yeah, you have a problem. But if it comes and goes and you think, well, that's weird, and then you don't think about it any further, recognize that is a khatir Shaytani or a khatir nafsani, whatever it may be. We can't overly identify with them. Nevertheless, they have an effect on us if we capture them and keep them as our own. When we capture them, that passing thought that could come and go very quickly, once captured, may become an internal discourse, a little internal conversation that we have. That internal conversation may result in other things. We call this hadithun nafs. Hadithun nafs is that inner talk, that self-discourse. This is the person who's contemplating whether they should do that thing or not. They're thinking about it. It's no longer a thought that came and left. It's not a passing thought anymore. A key thing to understand is that as Muslims, we are not accountable for those passing thoughts. You're not accountable for the thoughts that occur to your mind that you do not act upon. If you think about pushing that person in the middle of the street, in the example I cited, you're not accountable. It's not as if you're intending to do that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the end of Surah Baqarah, there's a few verses. Towards the end, He says, وَإِن تُبْدُوا مَا فِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَوْ تُخْفُوهُ يُحَاسِبُكُمْ بِهِ اللَّهُ. If you disclose what is in your souls, or conceal what is in your souls, Allah will take you to account for it. When this verse was revealed, the companions of the Prophet ﷺ were frightened. They said to the Prophet ﷺ, we can withstand the rigors of prayer and fasting and zakat and jihad and hajj, all of these things. We can deal with all of those things. But who among us can withstand accountability for the thoughts that occur to our hearts and minds? They were very worried. Now they're thinking, any passing thought that I have, I'm going to be answerable for it on the Day of Judgment. It was very worrying. And they expressed this worry to the Prophet ﷺ. And shortly thereafter, after some time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed in the subsequent verse, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah does not cause a soul to bear a burden more than it can bear. Meaning, you are not accountable for the passing thoughts that occur. You're only accountable for the things that you commit to doing and carry out. And in a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ reiterated this reality. For he says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ تَجَاوَزَ عَنْ أُمَّتِي مَا حَدَثَتْ بِهَا أَنفُسَهَا مَا لَمْ تَعْمَلْ أَوْ تَتَكَلَّمْ. Allah has pardoned from my nation whatever occurs to them inside of themselves, as long as they don't do those things or speak about them. So alhamdulillah, this is the mercy of Allah Ta'ala that we're not accountable for the passing thoughts. That's not to say we're not accountable for things going on internally. There are certain things internally that we're accountable for. Envy, jealousy, rancor, wishing bad for people. There are certain diseases of the heart, things that are going on internally that may or may not be expressed outwardly, and we're accountable for those. But we're talking about passing thoughts here. So if one has passing thoughts that are recurring, and they're negative, they should seek Allah's help and not act on them, and they're not accountable. So we've looked at now the nature of passing thoughts and what happens. So you have passing thoughts of different origins. If the passing thoughts are captured, it's then, if it becomes an intention, we will call that ham, which is the word used in this hadith. The Prophet ﷺ says in this hadith, Man hamma bihasanatin, whoever has this decision, who decides to do a good deed and doesn't do it, they still receive a good deed. So ham is intending to do something, desiring to do something, having a determination. It's the first step before you do the action. And here is where we have to reverse engineer this whole thing. So after ham comes the resolve. After the resolve comes the action. After the action, if repeated, can often become a habit. So let's look at that in terms of bad habits. There's a lot of psychology concerning habits, how to build habits, how to instill good habits and break bad habits. But when we talk about good deeds, bad deeds, things that we're accountable for, in our Islamic spiritual psychology, they talk about how the khawatir, passing thoughts, lead to bad habits. So one of the ways of dealing with the bad habits is to reverse engineer the process. So the first thing is the passing thought. Let's say it's a nafsani or a shaytani passing thought. If a person ignores it and pursues what is good, it's of no harm to them. But what happens if they capture it? The passing thought comes of shaitanic origin or nafsani origin. They capture it. Now it's hadithun nafs. They're having an inner discourse about it. From that, now some desire may arise. I should do that. And they think about doing it. They think in their mind how they're going to carry it out. And from there comes this desire and intention to do it. From that intention comes the resolve, the azm to carry it out. Now, the only thing that's going to hold them back is some impediment, some inability, some obstacle in their way. They're setting out to do it. And now comes the action. They've done it. They could stop it after that and never go back to it. But chances are they're going to get the passing thought again, and then the intention and desire, then the resolve, then the action again. And that's going to keep happening over and over again until the habit is built. And once the habit is built, it's now israr. If it's a sin, it's now the sin combined with persisting in the sin. So there's two problems here, right? So if a person wants to address this, what do? They can reverse engineer it and start from the root, the passing thought, and know how to deal with the passing thought, recognize the passing thoughts, where they come from, and how to combat it at the root. This is very simplified. I'm oversimplifying it, but that's the basic structure according to many of the ulama who speak about the spiritual psychology. So understanding this is really important because it helps us to arrest the sin before it develops, when it's at the realm of passing thought, before it becomes a desire. So the word ham used in this hadith is sometimes, some scholars had interpreted it as khatir, a mere passing thought. So according to those scholars, this hadith is saying whoever has a passing thought of a good deed and doesn't do it receives a reward. And whoever has a passing thought of an evil deed and doesn't do it, they receive a reward. However, that is not the soundest understanding of the word ham. Ham is not the same thing as khatir. Ham is really a decision. It's a determination to do it. Because we see there's a correspondence between the first part of the hadith and the second part. There's a correspondence between the first part, which says whoever decides to do a good deed and doesn't do it, they receive a reward. And whoever decides to do a bad deed and doesn't do it, they receive a reward. If we say that ham is khatir, it doesn't make sense, because no alim ever says that you just having a passing thought of Hajj gives you the reward of Hajj. You have the passing thought of giving $1 million in sadaqah, you get the reward of giving $1 million in sadaqah. Because we can all do that right now. You can sit there and imagine all of these things, capture all those passing thoughts. You're not getting the reward for that. It's when it becomes a determination, but something prevents you, or you don't do it. There's a variety of reasons why a person may think to do something and not carry it out. And this is why Imam Ibn Hajar al-Haytami in his commentary, he says, when it concerns the passing thought and then the determination to do a good deed and not doing it, the reward one gets when they don't do it depends on why they didn't do it. If it was because they got distracted, they get a reward, but it's a lower reward than the one who determined to do it but was prevented from an external source. That's different. The one person, he wants to give sadaqah, he has the money, he goes and a gust of wind blows and he loses it all. He had no control over that. The money's gone with the wind. And the other person has the money and he intends to do it, and then he says, on second thought, I need to do this and that with the money. Both of them get a reward because they both intended to do good. But which one gets the higher reward? The one who was prevented by an external source, an impediment on the outside. The other one was just, he decided at the end that he was not going to do it, or he's going to put it off. So there is a correspondence between the two things here. Now, when we look at this hadith, there's a question that comes up. How is it that you get a reward from a good deed written on your account when you are determined to do a good deed but don't do it, but you don't get a sin written when you determine to do a bad deed and don't do it? If we're talking about correspondence here, how is it that you can think to do a good deed and not do it, yet still get a reward? But when you think to do a bad thing and don't do it, you're not getting a sin. Because in both cases, there's determination.
Isn't that just Allah's mercy?
That is Allah's mercy. That is Allah's mercy. But the person who thinks to do a bad deed and then doesn't do it, he's purposely not doing it. He stops. He leaves it off. That is called tark, the abandonment of something that one was thinking to do. That tark, that leaving of the haram, in and of itself is a good deed. If a person thinks, I'm going to go to the liquor store and get a bottle of Jack Daniels, and then on the way there they say, no, I'm not going to do that. That determination to stop is the purposeful tark, and for that a person receives a reward. This is one way of answering it. So the leaving of the haram is a rewardable act in its own right. If you intend to do good and don't do it, the intention is good in itself, and you get the reward for the intention. If you intend to do bad and don't do it, the purposeful leaving of it is a good deed on its own right. That's why you're not getting a sin.
It's very hard to leave when you have and think about it, you're going to do something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not doing that. When you're fighting yourself, it's very hard to leave sometimes,
Yeah.
That's why it doesn't work.
It happens, right? So Allah Ta'ala gives, we see here that He's giving according to His fadl, not His adl. We mentioned in the beginning that this hadith speaks about Allah's fadl and adl, His justice and His grace. We see that when it concerns the good deeds, He's giving according to His fadl. And when it concerns the person who does bad, He's not doubling the punishment or tripling the punishment. He multiplies the rewards, does not multiply the sin. The person does one sin, is recorded as one sin. Right? However, we have to be very careful here, because even though one bad deed gets recorded as one bad deed, this is not to suggest that all bad deeds are equal. Some are worse than others. The bad deed that a person may do is recorded as one bad deed in terms of quantity, but the quality of it may be very, very bad. It may be much heavier on the scale of bad deeds than those good deeds that are multiplied. So sometimes bad deeds are far worse, even if quantifiably it's still one bad deed. And sometimes bad deeds, sins, can be worse in certain circumstances, in certain places or situations. For example, if a person does sin X in the month of Shawwal, it's recorded as a bad deed. It has a certain gravity. But if they do the same sin in one of the sacred months, it's worse. If a person slaps someone without justification outside of the sacred months, it's a sin. But the sin is magnified if they do the same action in one of the sacred months. Or if they do that act in Monroeville, it has a certain gravity. If they do it in the Haram al-Sharif, same action, but it has more gravity because of where it's done. Right? The same action done to Fulan may have a certain level of sin and gravity. If it's done to someone who's known as a wali, it's much worse. So it doesn't mean that all sins are going to be recorded as a single sin of equal gravity. They can be worse or less depending on the situation. But we still see here the fadl of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that He rewards us with a multiplication of rewards. We don't even know, because the Prophet ﷺ says that the one who does the good deed, they receive 10 times to 700 times and beyond of multiplied rewards. He doesn't actually specify. And the ulama say the reason why he doesn't specify is because that's a greater motivation. If it's specified, you have your calculator out and you're like, okay, this is how much it is. But it says 700, well, إِلَى أَضْعَافٍ كَثِيرًا, and far beyond that, right? So we see the fadl of Allah, that He rewards for more than what we do. And we see the mercy of Allah, and that if we do wrong, is recorded as one sin, and one sin is easily wiped away by replacing it with a good deed, as we learned in the other hadith, that whoever does a wrong deed, let them follow it up with a good deed. Tamhuha, it wipes it away. And this is the fadl of Allah, alhamdulillah. So inshallah, we're going to stop here, and next week we'll cover hadith 38 and maybe 39. So we have maybe 3 more weeks of class. Any questions?
It's still not clear in my mind that if all actions are created, then why am I answerable? We're going to actually, in the sisters' halaqah, when we're going to cover Aqidah, we're actually going to talk about that in some detail. This is one of the thorny issues in Islamic theology, the issue of kasb. So really the question is, how do you reconcile between various verses of Quran and various realities? How do you reconcile between the fact that we have moral responsibility and free will and we choose to do things, and the fact that Allah Ta'ala has supreme will and He creates our actions? So it's really a question of how do you reconcile between those in a way that makes sense, that is consistent with our theology. So there's Wait for the detailed answer.
there's the short answer and then there's the long answer.
Wait for the detailed answer.
Well, we could give a brief answer. The brief answer is that we have moral responsibility, and Allah gives us a variety of choices that are created by Him, and we face the consequences of our choices and the actions that are created. We're still choosing. So that's the short and easy answer. The longer answer involves looking at the meaning of kasb, of acquisition. So we have actions. Our actions are ours. But the scholars of theology say that the actions we do are ours via acquisition, kasb. And the actions are Allah's via creation, khalq. So He creates the actions, but we acquire them through our choice and willful engagement. That's the short answer. The longer one comes later, inshallah. Alhamdulillah. Any other questions?
After we finish this, I was just wondering, can we start like maybe tafsir of the Quran or something?
That the intention was to do tafsir of Surah Yusuf, inshallah. We want to do tafsir of Surah Yusuf with maybe 2 to 3 weeks introduction to some basics on the science of Quran, the science of Quranic interpretation, so that we have a methodology and a framework for how we explore. And then from there we'll go into Surah Yusuf